Hi, in this class I'm gonna show you how to create constraints for animation. The constraints are essential when you have to animate your character interacting with other objects in the scene, since it will unite them and make them move together, but giving you the possibility to separate them whenever you want. Please note that to create a constraint we must have the controls of the rig visible. In this case we're going to constrain the mob to the FK controls of the arm. So first, place the object on the part of the character where you want to constrain it. So in this case we want the character to move the mob, so we will select its main control, and in the properties editor we'll go to the bone constraints section, click on the drop down menu and select child of. Now in the target section we must establish where we want this control to be constrained to, so we will select the name of our rig. Next we have to set which part of the character's body exactly we want it to be constrained to. In this case I want it to be the right hand, so I'll write hand. As you can see we have several options, which have an R or an L at the end. R means right and L means left, so there are several options that could work, but since we're animating the arm with FK, we'll go simple and save and select the option hand FK R. As you can see, the mob has moved elsewhere, so we'll have to click on set inverse so that it returns to its position. Below in the influence bar we can establish the degree of influence that the hand will have over the mob, but normally we always want to have it at maximum. As you can see, with this configuration any movement of the hand will move the mob. But you can continue animating the mob individually, so you can make small modifications easily. But if we wanted the object to determine the position of the hand, we'll have to create the constraint in the hand. But to make the constraint this way, we'll need to have the arm set to IK, since as you already know, the FK mode does not allow determining the position of the hand, but instead the angle of rotation of each joint. If we want to eliminate the constraint, we'll do it by clicking on this X. But if we just want to deactivate it, we'll do it with this I, with which we can activate it and deactivate it on any frame. This way, if for example the character were to throw an object and pick it up again, I would deactivate the constraint in the frame I want the character to release the object, and activate it again in the frame I want him to grab it. To do this, we'll go to the frame where we want the constraint to be activated. Place the mouse over the small eye and press S to create a keyframe on it. Now we'll go to the frame where we want the constraint to be deactivated and click on the eye to set a keyframe to deactivate it. However, there is one thing that you should keep in mind. In the frame where you deactivate the constraint control will go back to its original position. So we'll have to relocate it, which is not very difficult, just a minor inconvenience. And if for any reason you need to change the frame in which the constraint is activated or deactivated, you will see that as soon as we create a keyframe on the small eye, in the graph editor a new curve called disable child of will appear, which although we can move up and down indefinitely, it will only recognize two values, below 0 meaning deactivated and above 1 meaning activated. Okay, so if for example we wanted the character to take off his cap, we would just need to create another constraint where the cap is constrained to the hand, thus creating two constraints, one to the head and the other one to the hand, and keyframe them so that when one is activated, the other one is deactivated. and when the object is in the air, both of them are deactivated. It's very important that you make sure that you never have two constraints activated at the same time for the same control, because it wouldn't know where to go. This method is ideal when you want to glue accessories to your character or make simple constraints, since it has its limitations. So, to make more complex constraints, you'll have to use the next method. Imagine that we want the character to move the mop with both hands. And since we want the hands and the mop to have the freedom to move individually, we'll need a third control that moves the hands and the mop together in such a way that there is not a direct constraint between the others. Keep in mind that for this method you will also need to have the arms in IK. So firstly, we'll go to Object Mode, create an armature and press F to frame it. As you can see, it has a bigger side and a thinner side. The ball on the big side will be its pivot. So depending on what you want to animate and how it will rotate, you'll have to place the armature accordingly. And if you need to modify its size, go ahead and scale it. In this case, after analyzing how the mop moves in my reference, I think that to have a good control over the movements, the pivot should be on the tip of the stick. Now we'll select the mop, the character and the armature and change everything to pose mode. Next, I'll select the mop's main control and constrain it to the armature. We could write its name as in the previous example. Or we can also use the tool on the right, which is used to select the target on the viewport. And in the section below, we'll select the only option available called Bone. And as before, to reposition it, click on Set Inverse. Now we'll do the same with both hands, and done. We have created the constraints. As you can see, we can rotate both hands and the mop individually, or all together with the armature. Lastly, to make things easier and cleaner, we'll create a new picker for this armature, so we can animate it without having to continuously hide and unhide all the controls. And remember to click on Set Namespace before creating the picker, otherwise it won't work. But what if instead of a mop is a box and I want it to be attached to the chest or hips of the character? Right now with this configuration we would have to go frame by frame making sure that the box doesn't get into the character's body, but is always barely touching it. To solve this, we'll just have to create a constraint on the armature to which the hands and the box are already constrained, and constrain this armature to the chest or any other parts we want it to be attached to. Done, the box will now move with the chest as long as it has this constraint activated. Okay, so now you know how to do constraints. So see you next class.